Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Neiman, and I'm the president and one of the 4 co-founders of USC Ideas, the USC Innovation-Driven Entrepreneurial Association. And I'd like to welcome you to Innovation Eve with Jim Flanigan. For those of you who don't know, USC Ideas is a university-wide student organization that promotes collaboration across all disciplines at USC and hosts exciting, accomplished, and intelligent speakers. This evening, Jim Flanigan will talk about his book, Smile Southern California, You're the Center of the Universe. Mr. Flanigan is a business columnist for the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, and other publications. He has covered national and international business and economics for 46 years. He has focused on every aspect of business and finance and examined in major articles the economies of countries stretching from Europe to Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and Africa. For 20 years, he wrote a column in the business section of the LA Times. He now writes for the New York Times, and his book, Smile Southern California, You're the Center of the Universe, published on March 2nd, tells of Southern California's vibrant business climate and its relation to the global economy. Mr. Flanigan started as a financial journalist at the New York Herald Tribune in 1963, having joined that paper in 1957 while attending college. During 17 years with Forbes magazine, he served as bureau chief in Washington, Los Angeles, London, and Houston, and later in New York as an assistant managing editor. His journalism has won numerous awards. So now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Jim Flanigan.
Thanks very much, Brian.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't have to use that. That's just a light. In all the years of all that reporting on business and everything, you might notice that this fellow has never learned timing. This is a positive book, and it was written and largely copy edited before the great downturn, but it came out smack in the middle of it. So you ask, what's wrong with your head? Well, what I'm going to do right now, there's no denying the downturn. Why deny it? There's no understating it either. It's quite serious, as we know. Worldwide recession, and it is continuing. But the book is based really on looking at Southern California as a microcosm of the global economy. And I've divined 3 basic large elements that will tell us where our strength is and point the way for us to come out of it. Out of the downturn, going forward, what propels our economy and what will propel it. And I'm going to speak only for 25 to 30 minutes. I have a watch here, and I will abide by it. And I have a PowerPoint presentation that is really just pictures to punctuate my points. And of the 3 elements, 2 of them are pretty broad, and you know them already. One of the advantages of Southern California is that we're connected to a global economy, interconnected with it, and more connected than ever, and also that the global economy is larger by 2 billion people since the end of the Cold War. What that means basically is that a lot of people in China, a lot of people in India, in Asia especially, but Eastern Europe, have joined the world economy, interconnected with it, and interconnected with Southern California, with us here. Also, we have a growing population in Southern California. My Southern California starts in Santa Barbara, goes to the border, from the ocean to the inland empire, 22 million people. And 22 million people and growing. We are growing faster than the rest of the country. There's a professor right here at USC, Dowell Myers, who has written a book called Immigrants and Boomers, pointing out that because of this, California and Southern California, in the long future, you'll have more active workers supporting retired people than the rest of the country. You might have 3 workers to 1 retiree, the rest of the country 2 workers to 1 retiree. These are very broad figures. Myers has written a very good book and a very scholarly book. But my third point about what is our advantage, I say, well, our advantage is that we have continuing development of technology and we have an entrepreneurial economy. And those are nice words, and what do I really mean? Well, I tell things by example. And so to talk about our entrepreneurial economy, we have our economy is a knowledge economy. That's the economy of the United States today. That's the economy of a growing portion of the world. Peter Drucker, a man I knew, and people know his name. He was at Claremont for many years, great management scholar. Peter Drucker said, the knowledge economy is replacing the old economy of the triumvirate of land, labor, and capital. And Drucker also said that the center of an entrepreneurial knowledge economy will be the universities and the schools. In an industrial economy, you need factories. In a knowledge economy, you need research universities, like this one here. So then I will go into some examples and try to explain how this happens and how does technology help us. We've been here before. We've been here in a pretty deep recession. When this used to be the center of aerospace and defense industry in the United States and basically for the world. When the Cold War ended in 1989 and the Berlin Wall went down, the aerospace defense industry of Southern California lost 500,000 jobs, and that was directly. And so if you lose 500,000 directly, the real estate declines in value, maybe 25, 30%, just like today. Widespread vacancies, widespread reductions, all sorts of predictions. We also had an earthquake and we had civil disturbance. We had a lot of things at that time, and a lot of people said, I don't think this area is coming back. I was writing a column at the LA Times in those days, and what I called ostensibly sensible business people said, this place is not going to come back, Jim. You've lost $18 an hour jobs, and what do you have now? You have Latino immigrants making minimum wage. I don't see how you're going to build an economy. But you could go around and you could find entrepreneurial companies, and that's how we built the economy. And the roots were in technology. What kind of technology? The internet was invented in Southern California. It was invented because the Pentagon wanted something that was a communication system without a center. If you have a center, it can be knocked out. And so a man out at the Rand Corporation named Paul Barron thought maybe you'd have a network of packet switching. You've heard those terms today, of course, but you didn't hear them then. And then the Pentagon gave a contract, a research contract to UCLA, where 4 people, Lawrence Roberts, Robert Kahn, Leonard Kleinrock, and Vinton Cerf, invented the ARPANET. I say that because the ARPANET, the foundation of the internet, actually helped us expand our position in global trade, which is a central industry of this region. And how did it do that? Because faster communications filled up the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. And so let's see, now if I just hit this, will I get something on a screen? Can I have slide 2, please? Oh, that's Charlie Wu, and that's Peter Wu. And who are they? Well, Charlie Wu came from Hong Kong. There's an aspect to our economy that is global, as I said. Charlie came from Hong Kong to study physics at that other university, UCLA. But his parents came also, and they had a restaurant in Redondo Beach. And Charlie thought, you know, I'd really like to get him out of the restaurant business. There's grease, there's heat, it stinks. And so he bought a warehouse here on East 2nd Street. And he thought, fine, I'm from Hong Kong. They make toys in Hong Kong. I'll import toys from Hong Kong, and I'll distribute them to retailers in the United States. But before he could really get going on that, menial workers, people who wash dishes in restaurants and that kind of thing, came to him and said, hey, can we have some toys from you, and we'll sell them at the weekend swap meets where a lot of our friends and families go. And so they started selling toys one thing led to another. They came back to Charlie for more toys. Now you have Mega Toys. It's down there on 2nd Street. You can go visit it any time. It's a big warehouse full of toys. Charlie then started to have toys designed here. After all, the toy industry was already prominent here. The Barbie doll started here and is an earlier example of globalization. There are 41 countries contribute to the Barbie doll. I have no idea why, but the hair will come from South Korea, and part of the costume will come from Indonesia, and so forth. Anyhow, long story short, it made Los Angeles and Southern California the center of the toy industry in the United States, displacing New York as the center in the United States. And I tell that story because I really want to get on to my second entrepreneurial example. There was a man, a fellow named Andrew Viterbi. Everybody here knows the name Andrew Viterbi. Andrew Viterbi was born in Italy, in Bergamo, Italy in 1935. And his family couldn't stay in Italy because the Viterbis were Jewish, and in 1935, Mussolini's Italy was not a good place for Jewish people. So he came to Boston with his father, who was an ophthalmologist, but the father was struggling, but Andrew evidently was bright because he won a scholarship to MIT. That's Andrew Viterbi. And he won a scholarship to MIT, and then he probably did well there because his first job out of college, he was recruited by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And the Jet Propulsion Laboratory gave him an assignment of trying to find some way to identify an authentic signal from space amid all the noise. And the Defense Department got in the act also and said, we need an authentic, genuine signal across battlefields where there is massive jamming and interference and all sorts of noise. And so Andrew Viterbi developed the Viterbi Algorithm. I realize everybody in this room knows what an algorithm is, so I won't bore you by explaining, but he invented the Viterbi Algorithm. The Viterbi Algorithm happens to be a central principle of the cell phone. And so Andrew Viterbi was given more research contracts. He got together with a man from University of California, San Diego, named Irwin Jacobs, and here's Viterbi and Jacobs at a whiteboard, and they founded a company named Qualcomm. And Qualcomm made Andrew Viterbi, I think, quite wealthy. In any event, it endowed a building right down the road from here, the Viterbi School of Engineering. The point being, this was all knowledge. This was all new technology. Nobody before the modern day dreamt of telephones that people would carry around and just regularly speak over them. Nobody thought of Qualcomm. Now, this was military research also. Code division multiple access comes out of things developed for the Navy in World War II and then developed and developed. And today, CDMA and Qualcomm they're into the 4th and 5th generation. In South Korea, they use it everywhere. It's part of the communication of handheld devices. That is the future of communication, the future of your television set, and so much else. Now, there's the technology, but what's this entrepreneurial thing? We've always had a very entrepreneurial economy here. This is a new place, this Southern California. We do not have, as a fellow named Michael Tenenbaum, who has an investment bank out on the west side, he said, well, here you don't have people paying attention to old families. Now, I think it may be exaggerated how much other places pay attention to old families and get stuck in, well, if we know how to do things because, well, you're of the family of this person and that other person. Here it seems new, and it is new. But even so, we've had great entrepreneurs here who couldn't raise a dime. You have to have capital to start a business. We had Simon Ramo went to Caltech. He took 2 degrees at Caltech, probably because only doing 1 degree wouldn't take up enough of his time. And he partnered with a man named Dean Woolridge, and they were very bright, and they worked for the Defense Department and invented the guidance system for the intercontinental ballistic missile. But in the late 1950s, Ramo and Wooldridge wanted to raise some capital, and they went to the financial markets, or they had an intermediary and went to the financial markets. Financial markets said no. No, these are bright people. Bright as they may be, there's no collateral with bright people. What are we going to lend to? What are we going to invest in? Two people with good minds and a knowledge of technology? That's not something you can back. And in Redondo Beach, please, you need something more solid. So they partnered Ramo and Wooldridge with Thompson Auto Parts of Cleveland. Auto parts are solid. Cleveland is far more sensible than Redondo Beach. And that was the foundation of TRW. So you see, so they couldn't raise money, but now you were in a time of entrepreneurship, and capital was available. The future was better to invest in than the past. Well, let's see where, that's the Port of Los Angeles. You know what, that's Michael Milken. I speak of Michael Milken. Michael Milken was just one of many. That's even more attractive than Michael Milken. But all of a sudden, in the 1980s, Milken was one part of that picture. Another part was other things. Money seemed to be available for venture capital, for equity capital invested in new businesses. One reason it was the tradition of research universities doing research and coming up with products and coming up with new businesses. And why did that occur? Well, because in 1980, believe it or not, the Bayh-Dole Act, a law of the United States passed by, I suppose, Representative Birch Bayh of Indiana at that time. He later became a senator, and Senator Robert Dole, Bob Dole, the war hero. They passed a law that said if you get research money from the government, you have to make an effort to transfer technology, to organize technology and transfer to the public good. Found companies, make connections that really will utilize this knowledge, do new things, have new processes. And I think in the time that I have, I want to go quickly, so I'm not going to dwell on things. I'd like to give you an idea of how this works. And so in my notes, I've got a lot in this book about entrepreneurs and that kind of thing. But just to give you an idea, years ago, San Diego, of course, suffered in all of this, Defense Department breakdown. But in San Diego, they had an outfit called the Connect program. It was not a venture capital outfit. It did not invest in people. It did not have money to invest, but it had a connection. It took the money people in San Diego, the investment people, investment funds, brokers, whatever, and brought them together in meetings, mixers you might call them, with the engineers and scientists at the University of California, San Diego. And I remember writing, in fact, I've seen what has come of it. There was a company down there named IDEC, I-D-E-C, and it was founded and it was helped by this Connect program because that allowed them to attract some money and to keep on their research. At that time, they had they were working on something that helped poor people who had to take chemotherapy, where, okay, it could focus the drugs more and the stuff more so that it really attacked the cancer cells without killing everything else around it. Today, IDEC is Biogen IDEC, and it has a drug, it has something that alleviates or helps people who suffer with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, also another one with MS. It has become part of the great biotechnology and drug structure of our industry. That started in San Diego. Another outlet of technology transfer is California Institute of Technology. There's a company I wrote about named Calando. It also has a cancer drug, and it was founded by Dr. Mark Davis up at Caltech, and the Caltech program of technology transfer. And right here, in fact, was it last year or the year before, I wrote about a scholar at this university named Roberta Diaz-Brinton. Roberta Diaz-Brinton has done research and is developing products that may alleviate or prevent Alzheimer's in women. And it's a research project. It has help from the National Institutes of Health, and it is trying to get in touch, at least when I wrote it, it was trying to get in touch with some venture capital backing and possibly succeeding because its go-between, its helper was the Stevens Institute of Innovation. Anyhow, Christina Holly is here. But this is the same kind of thing as Connect. It's where the universities, the research universities, have the means of giving us the new technology, and that is going to be the foundation of our economy going forward, the kind of research done at this university and others. Max Nikias, the provost here, says he wants USC. His dream is to have USC as a global university and to utilize the $400 million of research money that this university employs every year, or has every year in its grants. It's a great tradition, but we have other traditions. In the picture, by the way, that's on the screen is of Sabrina Kay, a Korean immigrant who came here with her parents at the age of 17. She wanted to be in the fashion business, but she really didn't think she was very good as a designer, so she founded a college, or a career school, vocational school you might call it, out on Wilshire Boulevard, and there she could train people who wanted to work in the garment business. Then she sold that. She took another degree at USC. Now she owns another college, a college down in Cerritos. And her idea was, okay, all of these companies have money for training. So she doesn't have to really develop a new curriculum. She goes to these companies and says, well, you want to train your people to be physical therapists. Tell me what are the parameters? What is your training program? I will teach people specifically to your training program. She does the same thing with legal firms. You want a paralegal? What is your training system? I will train to that parameter. It's a good idea. It's another idea. I know we have an entertainment industry here in Southern California. It is a central industry. It is a founding industry of this region. And we are in the Annenberg School. And we have the entertainment, the movie industry, the industry that was movies and television. A very smart man said for this book, that's Marty Kaplan right there, said, now it's become ringtones. You sell ringtones. Well, you will sell everything because entertainment media is morphing, that's a high-class word, morphing into everything else. Where am I in my slides? Oh, that's another entrepreneurial story. How much time do I have to tell another entrepreneurial story? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? That's a picture of Andrew and Peggy Chung. Everybody here know who Andrew and Peggy Chung are? Everybody have Panda Express? Yeah, well, they came here. Andrew's father was a great Chinese chef, a world-renowned Chinese chef, and given how tremendous the Chinese are with food, this guy must have been pretty good, Ming Tsai Chung. But Andrew came to some college in the Middle West, and so did Peggy. Peggy came from Hong Kong, Peggy Tsang, and they met at the University of Missouri. Peggy went on to Stanford. She's very bright, studied math and all those great things. And Andrew started a restaurant in Pasadena so his father could immigrate, and they started Panda Inn in Pasadena. Then they thought they would do a branch of that restaurant over in Glendale, just at the time the developers were building Glendale Galleria. So the developers came to eat at Panda Inn and said, gosh, could you develop this kind of good food for a mall food court? And so Andrew and his associates tried to do that and did it. And today, Panda Express has 1,041 stores. And it is all owned by Andrew and Peggy Chung. And they live in South Pasadena. And they have a whole different system of training their employees and helping their employees. They want their employees to improve themselves all the time. Not simply how many orders of orange chicken did you serve today, but improve yourself. I write in the book that the system is actually Confucian, after the great sage of China, and we have a changing world in that regard. I think we're going to do better with the panel, but I do want to talk about the entertainment industry. That's the Chinese garden, by the way. There was a time, I write in the book about a banker named Henry Wang. He founded Far Eastern National Bank. He studied at USC, studied accounting at USC when he came here, and he studied accounting, and he was an accountant, and then he started a bank, a nationally chartered bank, Far East National. He tried to buy a home in Pasadena back in another time, and the broker said, no, you could not. Today, I believe some Chinese people live in Pasadena. In any event, the Huntington Gardens wanted to have a Chinese garden, and it was endowed by Chinese people, but they insisted that everything in that garden came from China, just to be authentic. That's the Jade Garden. That's another story. But this is Disney in China. In the entertainment and media industry in Los Angeles, it is really, if Houston is the center of energy in the center of energy technology in the world, well, surely the center of energy technology of film and video and entertainment media technology is here in Los Angeles. It is right here at this university in the Cinema and Television School, which has received $175 million from George Lucas, I believe. But what do I mean by that? I mean that the things are developed. It has always, or at least in modern times, the movie industry has made, there's more revenues coming from international than national, because international is very large. And so you might think, well, great game. There's lots of people in China, there's lots of people in India. All they have to do is sell more television shows and more movies overseas and put the money in the bank. But the world is changing. That worked in the post-World War II period. That's why most of Europe and most of a lot of places grew up on I Love Lucy and and Gunsmoke and shows like that. That doesn't work that way anymore. The countries themselves, the societies themselves, they want more of their content. They may put restrictions on how you can do it, but I know from Robert Iger of Disney that they have to really work in the economy of the country they are in. Disney has a television channel in India, but it's on the Indian economy. You cannot pay an engineer in Hollywood to make the thing and send it over there. The Dragon Club, anybody here who ever saw the Mickey Mouse Club when they were young, well, in China, kids are going to the Dragon Club. And it's part of this new economy we are going to be going into. For years, we have benefited from the foreign trade that I started off with the idea that we design here and they make it there. China would get, well, in testimony to Congress, it is said that China got 20% of the value added. The rest of the value added came to the United States, to the designers here, to the retailers here, more to the logistics companies, the companies of warehousing and trucking and transportation in our community and across the United States and into other countries, into Mexico, into Canada. But now, maybe in the future, as President Obama said, we are not going to be, the American consumer will not be able to uphold the whole world economy, and you are going to have developing societies develop further. They're going to develop as consuming nations and broadly mixed economies. And in that case, it's going to be a tremendous challenge for us, but also a tremendous opportunity. Arnold Toynbee, a business historian, always said you have challenges and then you have the response. Well, the challenge to us, and in chapter 8, which is the final chapter of my book, I go on to some of those challenges. One challenge we're all familiar with. There it is. One challenge here in Los Angeles, our great society, is can we move? Will we continue to move? That's the 405 at Wilshire, but it could be many other intersections. And the answer that I got, and we'll discuss this, is that we will have public-private partnerships. There are a lot of companies. There's a company named Macquarie, M-A-C-Q-U-A-R-I-E, an Australian company, and its focus is investing in infrastructure in the United States. Warren Buffett is investing in manufacturing and infrastructure in the United States. He has bought some companies. One of them is a kind of infrastructure-related construction company that was owned by the Pritzker family. Another one, he bought a machine tool company called Iskar. Iskar was a machine tool company that was founded in Galilee, in Israel, by a man named Steph Wertheimer. And Wertheimer's son runs Iskar, and they invested mightily in the United States. They own a lot of machine tool companies. Owning machine tool companies indicates to you and to me that the new sciences of nanotechnology and nanosystems, you are going to get into molecular manufacturing. You are going to transform manufacturing, and you're going to do it in the United States. That's why a Warren Buffett would pay $6 billion to own machine tool companies and own 80% of Iskar. But moving on, the real challenge to us, if I said that the universities are our future, that's where the research will be done. We have more research universities in Southern California than anywhere else in the United States. We have UC Santa Barbara, UCLA, UC Irvine, UC San Diego, UC Riverside. We have the University of Southern California. We have the California Institute of Technology, the Claremont Colleges and Claremont Graduate School. A tremendous complex of this kind of brain power, backed up by Cal State, backed up by everything, but at the bottom of that great pyramid of learning is our public school systems. And that's where you say, oh, what are we going to do? I said we had a growing population. We do. We have we don't have the growing population because of immigrants directly, but because of the offspring of immigrants. The offspring of immigrants are people like me, first-generation Americans. If you educate those children, your society blossoms because you have people adding value to themselves, using their minds. And so one of the great challenges and one of the our response is what you hear is the program to reform education. You hear it every day. You hear it from the president. You hear it from the new Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan. And to be sure and to be fair, you've heard it from the previous administration and the administration before that, and every administration you can remember for the last 20 or 30 years. We've had this continual angst about our education systems, particularly in the big cities. And it gets to be a political question, and it gets to be a question of union power and all these things, but basically you have to improve the education. Charter school, I write in this book about some charter school organizations and about an organization called newschoolsventurefund.com. Sounds like, oh, somebody's going to make a buck on schools. Well, people do make a buck on schools, but this outfit is run by, it's actually founded by John Doerr, the venture capitalist, Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield and Byers up in Silicon Valley. And Doerr, you know, backed Amazon. His most recent big company that he backed is called Google. John Doerr made lots of money backing Google. And so I asked him, I said, this venture fund, you know, New Schools Venture Fund, is that a philanthropy or is it a business? He said, it's a philanthropy that is regulated like a business. It backs schools, it gives some money to the schools. Now the schools are not private schools, they're charter schools. They get the same state funding per student that every other school gets, but differently managed independent of the overall Los Angeles Unified School District and big organizations. And they get to do things differently. Maybe you have more school hours per year, school days per year. There's an outfit called the Alliance for College-Ready Preparatory Schools here in South Los Angeles. I'm going to wind it right up. And also the Inner City Education Foundation right here in South LA. More, I think I should say, in the when the panel gets here. because I've really wound up with that is our challenge. If we educate the people, we have a great society. And if you don't, you really pay a cost. So there you are. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope I told you something. Why don't I have a seat?
So sorry for interrupting you. I'm sure everyone was enjoying it, but now Mr. Flanigan is going to be joined by an esteemed panel to talk about business, policy, economics. And the panelists are the following: Christina Hawley, USC Vice Provost for Innovation and the Executive Director of the USC Stevens Institute for Innovation, and Dean Jack Knott of the School of Policy Planning and Development. Marty Kaplan, he's the chair of the Norman Lear Center in Entertainment, Media, and Society, Annenberg School of Communication, and Dean Ernest Wilson of the USC Annenberg School for Communication.
Well,
I thought you were going to ask us questions, Brian.
Oh, is that? I wasn't aware of that.
well, how are we supposed to do this?
Oh,
I mean,
You can lead a discussion or however you
Sure. Hey.
No, I was thinking.
go for it.
No. Anybody.
I was hoping that.
Sure.
I was
Just-
hoping
just
that.
say-
I don't mind starting.
Just say, Flanigan, I think you're full of soup. Come on.
First of all, I really like the cover of your book. It's a classic. Normally, a book on economic development might not attract attention, but this really does.
It's, I don't know if you can see
Oh,
it.
well, no, we can put it on the slide 1 or the beginning.
And I also really enjoyed reading the book. It's got some excellent ideas in it about the nature of the global economy in Los Angeles and its future. And it's a very optimistic book. And we need that in our times today in particular. But I wanted to just comment on a couple dimensions of the economy that we've in our school been working on, but it's stimulated by some of the things you wrote in your book. And one of those has to do with the interconnectedness of different areas of the economy that benefit from being in the same place. And just think of, for example, fashion, movies, TV, toys, recreation. It's no coincidence that skateboards and surfboards and the kind of toys you're mentioning and the fashion industry and so on are all located here. It's one of the reasons is that they benefit tremendously from the movie industry and TV and the culture of creativity and the image that Los Angeles has around the images that are created of Los Angeles through those media. And for example, if you talk to some of the major fashion houses here in LA, people like Max's Ria, for example, they moved here primarily because the movie, or one of the main reasons is the movie industry is here. And they can put their clothes into films, into TV. They get ideas from films and TV for fashion designs, and it's a really symbiotic relationship. And when you look at Disney, I mean, it's not just movies, it's toys, it's recreation, it's all of those things combined together. So Disney kind of covers the waterfront, but a lot of these industries are able to thrive here, I think, partly because of this interconnectedness, among these these aspects of creativity, et cetera. And then I want to make one other point, and that is there's a faculty member in our school called Elizabeth Currid, and she's written a book recently about how the arts and culture have driven the economy of New York City, and she's working on a book now on this subject in LA. And it's interesting I don't know how this works in LA, but in New York, people who are interested in getting into the arts, be it painting or be it theater, or whatever it is. They can go to New York and they get into social networks that lead them to connections, that lead them to auditions, that lead them to get into and creative roles, etc. And that presumably happens in LA as well, where the social networks created here, you make jokes about, the waiter or the waitress, is actually a aspiring actor, but there's whole cultures of networks of people in West Hollywood, and different areas of the city, that those social networks become very important to continuing the success of the movie industry, the TV industry, the arts industry here in LA. And that's very important because those social networks and that interaction cannot be recreated in Kansas City or somewhere else, right? Very easily. So that even though digital technology can go anywhere, that set of patterns of social connection don't easily
But
move.
by the same token, what about the question that I know the entertainment industry is worried about, or we read it all the time anyway? The productions are not here. Last year, every day in the news. Last year there were X productions originating in LA. Now they're in Vancouver, or New York is giving tax breaks and attracting productions. Does that really hurt us?
Well, actually, the production end of the movie business is in some ways the least interesting. It's terribly important in terms of jobs, but it is not where the creative work is being done. The creative work is happening here. The writers are here, the costume designers are here, the directors are here, the actors are here, and they get to the point when they have to decide, after all that pre-production, a movie is made in pre-production, 26 weeks of pre-production before the shoot. That has to happen here just because of the synergy that you were talking about. I have to say, we're very proud at the Lear Center, a plug, that Elizabeth Currid, your faculty member, is running a project for us called Star Maps.
Right.
And through that, she is currently analyzing the ways in which the actual physical relationships of people are essential to being a creative community. And that, in some ways, is at the core of your book. I mean, in the digital world, they call, do you know the term meat space? Yeah. It's the retronym about where we are here in meat space. We are flesh. We're not online.
M-E-A-T.
Yes. And meat space, not cyberspace,
M-E-A-T.
is essential for a creative community. You can do lots of stuff online. You can do social networking. You can do all kinds of things. But unless there are coffee shops and clubs and places you can hang out and meet with each other, the creative activity which catalyzes an entertainment industry such as we have here, or the equivalent in New York, is not
really
possible.
freaking out.
No, you know what I was thinking? Did all the great bankers and the people who invented the derivatives and did all the things, did they have enough meat space? Maybe they had too much digital space and they didn't know what the securities were worth.
They had meat up here.
The meat head.
But let me try. I'm a little jet lagged, so I'm going to be a little bit grouchy, having just gotten off an airplane, a 20-hour flight. But
Not all on the tarmac.
no, just flapping my arms. It was a long flight. And I've only read 2 chapters of the book, so I have to sort of apologize in advance. But I do think that we're absolutely on the right track in talking about networks of creativity among various groups. And it seems absolutely the case that the co-location of people who are designing video games, which are now larger than first-run movies, designing other forms of narrative and storytelling, as you call it, not just content, is hugely important for this industry and for this town. But as a relatively a newly arrived immigrant from the East Coast, what I find strange about this town and its culture is something that you don't see in Boston, you don't see in Route 128 around Boston, you don't see it in Silicon Valley to the same extent. The dullest corridor around Washington, D.C. and biotechnology. In those places, you have pretty close relationships between universities, the private sector, local and state government, and very active nonprofits. They create what I call a quad because there are four sides to this thing: government, private sector, university, and nonprofits. Those are places which are capable of kind of serial innovation, one invention after another, over time. And what I find striking here is that the people in downtown LA do not talk as much to the University of Southern California or UCLA or others as the people in their comparable positions talk to Harvard and MIT, or the work of a number of economists who look at the sort of ecology of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
That Mr. Hewlett and Mr. Packard started off in universities. And this is a town that, from my experience, is grossly under-networked to create the social networks necessary to sustain innovation, broadly speaking. And I've talked to another recent immigrant.
You're talking primarily about technical innovation.
Yeah, sort of innovation more broadly. And it may be that that is true, what I'm saying may be true more broadly, and it's not true in the entertainment industry. But the new head of the Chamber of Commerce, I've raised this with him. I've raised it with people in the industry, in the entertainment industry. And there does seem to be a feeling that we're under-networked. Now, so I guess what I would pose to you is whether or not we're sufficiently networked in entertainment, but in terms of other kinds of technological innovation, nanotechnology, biotechnology, et cetera, we may be under-networked.
I think that's a very valid criticism, and it's something that, people are worried about. I was on a panel just this weekend with Abe Lowenthal, Dr. Abraham Lowenthal at USC, and he's written a book called Global California. And we had a tight network of the big businesses when we were led here by big businesses. Those big businesses, in turn, had started with entrepreneurs like Jack Northrop and Donald Douglas. But the point was there used to be a committee of 25 in Los Angeles, and I've been a business reporter a long time, and they'd say, well, how can we get back to the committee of 25?
A lot of women and minorities.
They were not in the 20, no way.
They were in the committee of 52 or something, which had.
But so that broke down. And what you have here is this very vibrant community. And what I think you have coming together for great public questions are the important networks of people. At least that's the way I see it. I'll give a couple of examples. I mentioned the ports of Los Angeles, Long Beach. Well, we know because it has been stipulated that they have to clean up their environment if they want to go forward and grow, and world trade to grow here. And it is going to grow here. But they have a $2 billion program, clean air in, Port of LA, Port of Long Beach. That is not simply, there's almost nobody united down there except the forces that are coming together of engineering, consulting, and shipping, and environmental science, and Cal State Long Beach, and the universities are warp and woof here in the economy. I don't believe there's any, including the entertainment industry, but also any other industry here, which is pretty broad. The biotechnology, it's all connected to universities and then out to the market.
Well, let me disagree. I mean, maybe there's sort of two arguments. One is that is LA robust in this area of economic development? Is it LA dead economically? No, you're saying it's not dead. I guess the question I'm asking is relative to the Boston area where Z spent a lot of time, or Silicon Valley, or the area in the southern part of Beijing, or the area around Dulles Airport in Washington.
I know.
The research triangle.
Or the research trial. I guess what I would say is
North
that
Carolina.
along a lot of the indicators that measure linkedness, LA is low.
I believe LA is
and-
low, and I believe all of Southern California is low because of the spatial,
Right.
the distances, but it is recognized as a very active place of entrepreneurial energy. So in your example of Boston, Boston's a small place. And Silicon Valley has always been more connected. There were restaurants where people went, and I used to go to the hotel where right there near Palo Alto, near Stanford, where, so it seemed easier of access than our great distances. We've been trying to overcome that, but I've spoken to people in Boston because they'd come out to conferences. You get all these, like there's a global conference now, but you would get investment conferences here where the money would come and say, Southern California is where I can find these prospects. Where I come out, oh yes, I talked to somebody who came out here from some big fund in Boston. He said, oh, well, I go to the Roth Capital Partners conference down in Dana Point. They like to hold conferences in the wintertime in Dana Point. There's a reason for that, probably not, maybe it's not a good place to hold it in Boston. But that very point, you have, everybody recognizes, there's 40 biotechnology companies in Southern California, more than possibly any other center.
Again, I guess
And
what I
about,
wanna-
as for the Dulles, as for the Arlington, Virginia, what is there but the draw is the government.
Yeah, but if you look at, I guess part of what I'm just sort of pushing you on a little bit
Yeah,
is
sure.
the argument that this is a rich, vibrant area is perfectly plausible. Doing great stuff, absolutely. Is it better than Houston, Detroit, et cetera? Absolutely. But I guess the question I keep pushing on is, of the 5 to 10, or say 3 to 5 best places in the United States that are innovative, that sustain that innovation over time.
You're talking primarily about technology.
Primarily about
Because
technology.
I don't think that would apply to the fashion industry or movies or TV or toys or recreation or the things related. Because I actually, and that's why I'm not convinced that the dispersal is the key factor here. Because in those industries, you actually have created, I think, very dense social networks. Even if you go to Venice Beach, you will find there's a lot of people there who are in the arts, in fashion, in movies, all hanging out in cafes and interconnecting. What I think you're pointing to, and I tend to agree with Ernie on this, is that there are very few places in the United States where universities and nonprofits and business have created this kind of perpetual innovation in technology, and we've mentioned some of them, and it doesn't appear that happens as
It
much.
happens here.
See,
They
isn't
spawn,
that
they
your
spawn
cue?
more companies here.
That's why we brought
factor,
Z
though,
here from
one factor
Boston.
you do not have in the Bostons and the Washingtons, really, that we do have here, the enormous connections to Asia. 2/3 of the world's people between the ages of 15 and 40 live in Asia. So the future markets, the future developments are in Asia. You have 1 million Chinese American people living here. You have enormous connections of commerce, which you didn't even have in previous times of immigration. It used to be people came from China and they formed a Chinatown with little paper lanterns, and there was all sorts of restrictions on what they could do anyway. That's all gone. And so now you have connections between the San Gabriel Valley and China that no other place on earth has, not to mention your connections of 500,000 people of Korean origin or background, and Korea, and so forth and so on. So you have this dual nature of vibrant entrepreneurship with connections to these parts of the world that are growing. The Indus entrepreneurs based in Orange County and in Silicon Valley, Indus River, India and Pakistan, they have developed $250 billion created $250 billion of new wealth in this area. How do they do it? By founding companies. Founding companies and then making connections. And
I think what I'm hearing too is that we definitely have amazing networks in entertainment, in the arts, the creative space. We have the customer base here. We have it's the biggest manufacturing center in the country. We have the largest port in the country with 45% of all of the trade going through port trade going through Los Angeles and Long Beach. And at the same time, I agree with Ernie as well that we're lacking in the networks and we're lacking the connections with the universities, but that's changing. And I think what that means is that there's a huge opportunity here, and I think that it's only going to get better. So just a couple years ago, USC started collaborating with UCLA, Caltech, doing an event called First Look LA, where we bring top VCs from around the country here to listen to our faculty and talk about their exciting technologies that might be spinning out sometime soon. And we're working together. Just a week ago, we signed, the 3 universities and the city and the business community signed a memo of understanding for a Clean Tech LA corridor and a collaboration between the universities. And so it's just beginning. I think that we're all committed to work together, which I think is unique, because I don't know of any city where the universities are collaborating like we're starting to do. You'd never see Harvard and MIT collaborating like that.
Well, again, you issued the challenge. No, the Toynbee challenge. You're under-networked. You're right. And you are now, the response is, will you create the networks?
So we're working on it.
Well, Ernie, you weren't nearly grouchy enough, I don't think so.
Sure.
I'm going to
out-grouch me, Marty.
I'm going to channel someone else's grouchiness. Okay. And it's on the topic of the university's role in this collaboration. And it's 2 people's grouchiness, which coincided today. On the op-ed page of the New York Times today was an incendiary piece by a professor at Columbia.
Professor of religion, by the way.
Who said that basically the 2 biggest problems in higher education today were tenure and the disciplines. And he wanted to blow that up because as a consequence of those, the universities were unable to innovate in the way that they should innovate, and they were unleadable by their executives. Well, 2 hours later, I was at the global conference you just mentioned, the Milken Global Conference, and I was at a panel discussion on the topic of the new university, which included the president of MIT, the president of the University of Montreal, a couple other academics, and to me, most interestingly, a woman who runs in Washington something called the Council on Competitiveness, which brings together labor, business, and the universities. And she was insistent and much more harsh than that editorial this morning, saying that unless the disciplines were blown up, unless tenure was gotten rid of, unless faculty governance was replaced by presidential leadership in universities, that the potential for American research universities to contribute to innovation was a very short fuse, and it's about to go out.
I think you have at this end of the panel, actually all 3 of us, 1, 2, 3, are probably the least disciplined here. So we would probably agree with that. I don't want to speak for my other colleagues, but is anybody from the religion faculty? Or,
I actually, am dean of an interdisciplinary school, and we do a lot of projects that are problem focused, et cetera, and fit into the vision that is expressed there in terms of what it ought to be like. But on the other hand, I actually really feel that a grounding in a discipline is really very important for doing interdisciplinary work. You really need to know something extremely well in order to be able to work across boundaries. And I think that's underappreciated. There's different types of interdisciplinary. There's one type is where you study a problem from just different dimensions. And you might look at the economic or the social. But then there's also interdisciplinary work in which the theoretical underpinnings of the disciplines over time merge, like in neuroscience, for example, and where they begin to realize that the theory that they have is too limited by their own discipline, and they start borrowing from the other discipline, and pretty soon you get almost a new discipline emerging. And that's, to me, where a lot of the most innovative work takes place. But that doesn't happen if you're not already really highly knowledgeable in a particular discipline, in my view. And I'll just take an example from the areas that I know about. I'm not a scientist, so I can't talk about nanotechnology or anything. But if you look at the impact of economics on the law, and there's a big discipline now that's emerged called law and economics. That can be done very poorly, and was done very poorly at the beginning and for many years, because what you had is lawyers trying to apply economic concepts in very elementary and often wrong ways to understand the law, and you had economists trying to apply their theories in a way that really didn't take into account legal theory. But now you're actually starting to get pretty sophisticated analyses that is almost forming a new discipline. And I think that's where a lot of the real innovations occur. So I'm not, as the statement as you stated it, I wouldn't fully agree with. I really feel what you need to create, in my mind, is opportunities at universities for those interconnections to be made, and for these new emerging disciplines to evolve, and for settings for that to happen, and for grant projects that facilitate that. But I would be opposed to eliminating the disciplines, for example. I don't care as much about tenure, but the disciplines I actually value. I don't value them if they're walled off from each other and you don't have this evolutionary innovative process.
Actually sounds very much like Olin College, which is is it Wellesley or Waltham, outside of Boston, and they were founded, I think it was 7.5 years ago, with a gift from the Olin Foundation, and they had 3 things in their bylaws. One is no tuition, no tenure, and no disciplines. But engineering, it's all engineering. So it's pretty wild. The only thing is the gift was $100 million, which it's not gonna last. So the question is, so they get the pick of the best engineering students, ones that are willing to take a risk to go to the school that's absolutely brand new, and it's very small, and everything's designed from design thinking. They think about from the standpoint of real design challenges in real world, and it's really fascinating. And at the same time, and I think that there's plenty of room for innovation in academia, and I think that universities and non-universities should just innovate as much as possible and try to disrupt the paradigm. And at the same time, there's something to be said for academic institutions that have been around for hundreds of years, that they're still going to be here after we're gone, and that it's not just following trends, and it's actually based on some real discipline, which I think need to evolve, and I think that we need to be. So I think the real question is, where's the middle ground? How do we innovate and at the same time not throw away everything that we've built?
A man named Leroy Hood used to teach at Caltech, and he had an idea that he told me, I'm just a reporter, and I didn't understand what the man was talking about, but I didn't jump in and just ask a question. What do you mean, Mr. Professor Hood? But he said, oh yes, it's very simple. The disciplines of biology and of computing are coming together. And he got a grant, or in fact, Bill Gates of Microsoft. Microsoft gave a big grant to the University of Washington. And now there's an institute at the University of Washington where Hood is pursuing that work. But it's your point that you really need to have a very good knowledge of bioscience and then of computer science. And if you're going to merge them, it's going to be a true development. not somebody who says, well, I know a little, I mean,
Right.
yeah.
I mean,
That
a
sounds
lot
like
of
me
the,
doing home repair.
I think Annenberg deals with this too. But we deal with how to train PhD students, and we're worried a little bit about having them this deep in 5 things. They really need to know something extremely well, and then as they get to the dissertation stage and so on, then they start integrating. And so we've been working a lot on our PhD program in that regard, really kind of on this question. So it's very fundamental to innovation and changing and training the next generation of scholars, I think.
Let me suggest that the importance of having a center for innovation like Z. Holly runs is institutionally extremely important. And I'm not saying that just because she's my friend and she's here. It's actually, it's true.
I paid him $20.
Because it gives a kind of institutional legitimacy to those people in the disciplines or in the schools who want to reach out, in the professional schools, who want to reach out and try something different. And so if I have students, as I do, or faculty who are interested in the area of innovation or interdisciplinarity, then there is a kind of a legitimate space where they can reach out. And because you have made this institution not just about commercializing engineering innovation, but to make it tied to the humanities and social sciences, then but that in turn gets to the leadership question. And this is why, in some ways, I wanted to press the idea of how do we link up more closely with downtown and the West Side, and et cetera, et cetera. The leadership of the university really has to be willing to take some risks, including angering some of those people in the core disciplines who are saying you're diluting the quality of the university. We want a strong program in X or Y. And the provost and the president have to say, well, that's true, but we're willing to take the risk that innovation and new things really come from the edges and not just from the core of the disciplines. In some ways, I think the disciplines are becoming more conservative. This is true, I would argue, in Jack's discipline and my own discipline, political science. Because if you were really interested in core political science stuff, that's where you go, to the political science department. If you're interested in more interdisciplinarity, you go to public policy schools, or schools like Jack's.
Or business schools.
Or business schools. Or you can even go to trade associations in Washington or LA. So there's a greater variety of these institutions, and what that then puts the burden on us, for those of us who care about these issues, is we have to be more retail and demand side oriented, which means, and since there are only 36 hours in the day, you've got to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce, and you've got to reach out to the non-governmental organizations, and you've got to reach out to this school and that center. So in some ways, it's a lot of work to make this happen, but I do think that USC has the potential, with the current leadership and with the kind of innovative programs that we have, to help take the city to the next level and become more like Silicon Valley, more like Route 128, in spite of this dispersion.
Not more like Silicon Valley or Route 128, but sort of paraphrasing Steve Sample, be our own Los Angeles.
because the large organizations that do exist in other places, there's not a lot of large for instance, if you said, well, let's just reach out to the bank. There's no large banks there's one bank headquartered here, it's City National, and that's about the largest bank headquartered here.
Well, there's no large, the shocking thing.
There aren't large
Des Moines has more Fortune 50 headquarters. Des Moines has more Fortune 50 headquarters than Los Angeles does.
The Fortune model hasn't worked in this town, this area, for a long time.
But that's a downside.
I mentioned Qualcomm. Qualcomm is a great
exception.
center for San Diego, or for the world. And there are some, there's a couple in Orange County, but they're not large either. The emphasis, in fact, when Irwin Jacobs was building Qualcomm, he had his choice of, okay, they had the the chips and everything else, And he decided that no, he would be better to sell off that. He sold actually the chip work to a Japanese company and decided to center his company around intellectual property. And that has been its strength. Sure, it's a big company. It's 13,000 employees, $10 billion, or vice versa, something like that. But he didn't go for, I'm going to be the most gigantic company. I am going to be this everything in, you know, the Henry Ford model of long ago, where Ford said from the iron ore through to the bumper of the automobile, I make everything.
Could I'd like to raise a little different issue, and it goes to the latter part of your book where you're talking about challenges, and I'm going to raise this from the point of view of a school of public policy, and that is, I think the LA region faces some really serious governance issues in terms of creating public-private partnerships of all sorts. I think we, for example, all the way from trying to solve the issue of the ports, you know, how do we solve the environmental and growth issue of the ports? I think that's a huge governance challenge that we're not really doing a great. We've made progress, but we're not there. The airport is another one. You know, we did a panel not too long ago about economic development, and I was really surprised to discover that the LA County is at odds almost entirely with the city of LA for the development of downtown LA. They fight over it. They don't agree on it. They don't co-invest in things, so they don't create kind of public infrastructure that is really needed in many areas, and we're going to have trouble with that, I assure you, in this transportation challenge that you have pointed out, and we have that trouble in schools. And so I really feel one of the big challenges that LA faces is a governance challenge. It's not able to bring together
We're not rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, we're not
really
rowing in the same direction. And to create the kind of public-private partnerstions that we're talking about requires some government ability to come together and do this. And so I don't know if you feel that way too.
The airport.
Ryan wants to shut us down.
The airport is a great example because I remember spending years writing column after column about how there's going to be a new airport in Orange County, and then no, there wasn't going to be. The latest, of course, is that you're going to have your airports out in the Inland Empire, and it's going to grow to 6.5 million people from maybe 4 million today. It's a very sure they're down now, but it's going to shift some of the focus of all of Southern California, and you will have, well, you have Ontario, but you will have airports out there. But that's just the point. We have our city government in Los Angeles is a weak mayor system by design since 1911 or since all time, and you have rule by the city council. Other cities, notably New York and Chicago, are noted for strong mayor systems. They happen to have strong mayors, but the system is what made them strong. And in school policy, Joel Klein in New York, superintendent of schools, probably gets a lot of flack from unions, education groups. He says, talk to Bloomberg. Talking to Bloomberg may be a tougher thing than talking to a superintendent of schools. And in Chicago, it's just legendary. The Daley family, people named Daley run the city. And you can talk to them. The superintendent of schools, Arnie Duncan, who is now the Secretary of Education, came from Chicago. So we do have to reform. We have to reform a lot of institutions in California. How much of that state budget that they argue about do they really have control over? Mike Hilsick, my friend, wrote a very good column this morning saying they're talking about some election in May, and he said it's a fraud. But basically, they have control maybe over 35%. I think it's even less. And they're arguing, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. But basically, any money in the state budget is spoken for. And every time they pass a new initiative, you speak for more of it. You say, no, don't touch that. That's out of your control. This goes back to reforms of 1911, so obviously you have to think. But you do have to think about how do you put these groups together. You know, the port of Los Angeles actually is owned by the city, so is Los Angeles World Airports. And that is a public body that operates and can operate. But the point with trade and anything else, the industrial groups pretend that they don't have responsibility for anything else. The shipping companies say, we only ship. And a company named Walmart or Home Depot, who receive the imported goods, say, we're only the receivers. We have no responsibility to say where warehousing is or what kind of hours the warehouses should work. So you need to have groups that say, look, we're all in this together, and we work for, that's what public policy and planning is all about, right? Challenge, response.
You know,
Ryan?
I
You're being
don't want to
patient.
stop a train going at 100 miles an hour. I enjoyed listening to you guys so much, different perspectives from leaders at our university, but I want to give an opportunity to everyone else to meet you guys.
Sure.
And we're going to have a reception upstairs. We're going to have hors d'oeuvres, so thank you very much.
Thank
Round of
you.
applause for our panelists.
Thank you, everybody. Wow.
You don't sound